Alrighty. So we're back. Let's start an animation. If you did not follow what we did last time, I really recommend checking it out. I go over like how to control the rig, how to move it around, controls to avoid, controls to use, what not to do with them. So it's a good way to sort of get your scene set up for some nice animation. So next we're gonna start actually making this scene, right? So we have our reference recorded, and let's start going into it. So our first step is let's get our. I'm gonna go back to the starting frame. I'm gonna start from this, like mid stride, okay? And let's start matching that pose. But we have to have Osri in a part of the scene that makes sense. And it kind of just depends on the scene setup. But I'm thinking we could go from if I'm jumping over a gap in this, I'm gonna want to do the same thing over here. And I might need to like remove some parts of this environment. So let's just delete this. Oh, let's turn back on polygon selection so I can grab this and just slide it away. You can even just straight up delete it. But yeah, there we go. So now we have a nice open spot, and then let's get Osri pointed at the gap, right? Note that I'm using the main control for this. This is pretty much going to be the last time you see me use the main control. I know a lot of you guys are into the mindset of like, oh, I can just like move this along and time that out and then do the jump. Don't freaking do that, because when the time comes to actually polish your foot contacts, this control is going to be sliding around and your feet are going to be sliding around too because of it, and it's going to be really annoying to get a good solid contact with that surface. Okay, so don't use the main control besides the initial positioning. Other times that it's fine to use the main control is like during the jump, right? If you wanted to have them jump and you animated it, but then your art director's like, hey, we had to make this, or your environment person, whatever, is like, hey, we had to make this gap a little bit bigger. Then on that jump, you can move this main control with that difference, right? However larger they made it. It's also good on like if you're doing like a lot of flips. Like think about like something like the Sonic movie. Like there's probably a lot of flips in that, right? The guy's really spinny, really fast. So if you're ever animating like a flip or something, you can kind of move this control to where the waist is and rotate it a bunch, and the character will flip really nice. Even if you're in IK, because those IK controls still follow the main control. The most common use for it though is if you have a scene that takes place on like a ship or something, or on like in a car, right? You just match this main control to the motion of that car, and then you can animate all your characters after the fact in that car. So that is the use of the main control. And I want to put this in here for the animation section, because I see so many scenes get ruined because they don't pay attention and they animate the main control when they should be animating the IK controls instead. So please do not mess with that after you place it. So that's going to be my position for that main control, and let's start matching my reference. So it's not as glamorous as you might think. Also note that my movement is not aligned with the foot right there, right? I kind of want to keep these feet pretty straightforward, as that's how I was walking. And to change this, right, because the control's orientation is that way. If you hold W and hold left click, change from world to object. space. Now look at that. See how it's aligned perfectly with that foot. So that's how it's you're gonna want to do a lot of your animating when you're moving this stuff around. Let's also move this main control down to where that surface is, so we can make some nice feet contacts. And it looks like we're a little bit in the surface right there, so let's move it up, and that's looking pretty good right there. Perfect. Okay, so now we have to start actually animating the character. So the reason that we got that reference and why we're very particular about it is because I want you guys to be using reference right now. You're still too early in your careers to be moving your characters just from your mind alone. If you really hate reference, you can also do a lot of thumbnailing, but like when you're starting out, please use reference instead. You can do additional thumbnailing if you'd like, but like you're gonna be missing so much detail if you take that approach. Okay, so let's rotate all that, and I'm using my foot roll control on the foot. Again, if you didn't watch the previous video, please do, because I go over a lot of really cool stuff in there. And then let's use our right hand select set just to make a nice natural pose. I like to get the posing of the hand out of the way. Some people might like put that in the polish phase, but why not just get a head start on it, dude? Why not get a head start on it? Like, otherwise you're just going to be spending so much additional time like going back through and animating that. I also see a lot of people try to use animation layers for stuff like the hands, and like they'll have like an animation layer for like the spine, animation layer for the head. I really hate that approach, and I don't recommend using it. Because one, your keys get really confusing. Two, your controls can be on multiple animation layers, and that again makes the keys confusing. And two, that's not exactly the use case for animation layers. Animation layers are for if you have an existing animation and you need to make an alteration to that, right? So yeah. I don't really work with animation layers like that. Instead, if I'm doing a lot of like motion capture stuff, I'll use animation layers to pump up certain actions, to make arcs more appealing, all that sort of stuff. But animation layers, kind of a subject for a different time. Now I'm looking at my silhouette, and I have kind of a line of action that's leaning a bit forward. So I'm going to lean Osri's waist a little bit forward as well. And then I'm going to straighten up kind of these top two spines. To make that like sort of swoopy arc back. And anytime that you pose your feet, you generally want to rotate the waist to complement that, right? If you have this point, imagine the waist as being attached by strings to these feet, and when that foot goes back, that side of the waist is going to rotate towards that foot, you know. And when you do that, you're gonna generally want to rotate your torso the other way to counteract that, so you get a nice twist along that. And the reason that we want to do that is because these, like, imagine these arms as being weights that are attached to the torso with strings, right? So when they swing the opposite direction, boom, like that, you're gonna want to rotate that upper torso even more, right? So that's just a little thing about posing your arms and torso to get some nice animation in there. And we might want to keep these a little bit further in. And we're rotating that. And there we go. That is our first pose. So after you hit a pose, drag select that guy. Oh, sorry. Let's make that. Let's make it so I can't select mesh, and let's make the environment reference again. That's our first pose. So grab the whole character, and we won't need the graph editor for a while in here. That's once we start doing some serious animation. And press S. So drag select over your character and press S, okay? Next up, we need to identify our next key pose right here, right? And now I'll just move my reference over so it's a little bit easier to see. When I'm a nice rule of thumb is that you need to find the extremes, right? So if this is my first pose right here, one nice rule of thumb with that extreme is the feet, right? So anytime that a foot contacts the ground, that is the main pose. Anytime that a foot leaves the ground, boom, that is a main pose as well. That's going to be a key as well, right? Then you also want to keep track of the arcs of those, right? So you're probably going to need a pose in the middle just to detail exactly what's going on there. And that's kind of how we break it down, right? That's first level. Next level is you have to have keys for the waist that are at its extremes. Like, look how low down my waist is right here. And then look how high it is right there. So you want to make sure that you get a key for that. That's usually also the same key that I'm using for the arc of that foot going up. And then that waist goes down first, like just a few frames before that other foot connects. So you might need another key on that waist specifically for that. But that'll be for later, you know. So let's just get our base keys. Like I said, for a walk, it's that foot leaving the ground, and then we can find our next pose, which would be contacting the ground right here. So let's find that pose. So we already have this key. Then it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 keys. It might be 11. Might be 10 or 11. It's hard to say. It'll be 10 keys to that next pose in there, okay? So let's make that pose. After you find from your reference and counting the frames, that's why it's important to be able to scrub by frames. We know that it's 10 or 11 frames ahead of this first pose. So let's go 10 or 11 frames down in our timeline. Now we can start moving these to their next position. I know it's leaving that main control or that waist control in the dust. We need to move that one too. But notice when you're moving that waist, you're like, oh, the hands aren't going with it. That's why I have that IK quick select set that we showed in the first video. It's because you're gonna have to be moving these a lot. So whenever you're moving that, boom, let's go get that into position. You might want to, you'll move these and notice that they're kind of spreading out from each other. That's because they're all moving in object space. If you switch back to world, it's gonna be a little bit harder to get a straight line going right there, but all of them are gonna move at the same speed there, right? So that's a nice way to get that character moving, okay? So that is our pose. Oh, let's get our reference back in a good spot so we can see it while we're animating. And that's gonna be, I think that's gonna be pretty good. Let's see. Yeah, perfect. So I'm noticing that this foot is now rising up. So I'm gonna rotate that up as well. And then I'm gonna go to the foot and I'm going to roll that to forward. Boom. And that's gonna give us a nice little like rolling silhouette from that, and it's gonna ease the hyperextension that you might feel on that leg. Let's remove our rotation from this, and I'm gonna remove our rotation from that other roll control. And if anything, I can do the opposite of that and rock it, because it's just basically, it's barely leaving the ground there. And let's get our waist into a better spot for this. We can just select all the IKs, and I want to get it a little bit more equidistant between these two. And then I'm noticing that my torso, look, my waist is rotating with those feet just a little bit. Doesn't have to be extreme. If you want like a more like sassy sort of walk, then you can rotate it a little bit more. But this will be fine. But what I'm noticing in my reference is that my torso is quite open to cam, and my cam is like coming from like 90 degrees. So if I open my torso in the animation as well, it's gonna look really nice, okay? And we can see that torso is pointing openly to cam now. We could even do it like a little bit more. And then now we have to get our arms into a proper spot. Mine are kind of out here a little bit, and my elbow is out there as well. You can use the clav to accentuate that animation, moving that back to spread out that silhouette. And then this hand is in front. And it is right in front of all of those controls. And I'm noticing that my hands are actually fists. So if you want that, I would definitely change that as well. Because I don't know, the fists kind of mean that I'm in like that my character's in kind of like a business mode, right? Like I gotta take care of something. In our case, it's gonna be jumping over this gap, which is probably too big. I did not jump that far in my reference, but we can probably cheat it. And then I'm also noticing that my head is kind of orienting down towards the gap at this point. So I'm gonna go into object. I'm gonna rotate that down a little bit. Let's get the base neck control involved in this as well. So there we go. And that's looking good now, okay? So once you're satisfied with that, drag select over your character and press S again, okay? Now we're gonna start viewing our animation, okay? So we have one step, right? Remember, I was talking about blocking, right? So I'd recommend for everyone, sorry, that's the music that we're playing. I recommend that we work this way when we're starting, right? Remember how this second section right here is in stepped tangents? So you can see each key that this person used for this. So please work that way. Again, to scrub on YouTube frame by frame, it's period and comma. So you can see all the keys that they used for this. And to work that way in here, you can just right click your timeline and do enable stepped preview. Now your animation is going to be stepped exactly like that video I just showed, right? So next up, what we're going to be checking out is kind of our in-between frames. We also need to make another key, right? So I'm going to go into that next key right now. And as I said, it is usually when like a foot is leaving the ground. So I need like this pose for sure. It's going to be a little bit easier once we have this last pose. So let's get this. That's when I'm like setting up. That's when I'm looking down at the crevice. And let's see how many frames that is in front of this other one. All right. So I think this was my frame. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Let's say 12. I think it's 12 frames in front of that. So I believe it is control period. No. Whoops. I don't know what that is. Alt period? Yeah. So alt period and comma scrub frame by frame in here if you don't want to use your mouse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I want you guys to be doing that, right? I see so many students not counting the frames because they think it's like cheating or something, right? And I don't disagree, right? But when we're learning, like, would you consider it cheating to like set up a live model for life drawing? Like, no, like that, you need that, right? That's not cheating. Like, I see where they're coming from, you know, because it's just like, oh, you're like you're copying the reference. But like, I think it's very valuable when we're learning to start that way, right? Because if you don't, you're not gonna have that baseline physics guiding your animation, and I think that's the biggest thing that weakens student portfolios, is that they're not working based on physics. And I see a lot of students that are like, well, I want my animation to be stylized, and it's like, well, yeah, but like, you want your film to be convincing, right? If you don't have convincing physics, the rest of the illusion falls apart as well. So please work with your reference. It's the biggest flaw I see in student work, and it makes for some awful animation. So yeah, so let's just work with our reference and get these poses working, right? So I'm probably gonna need to go back through and make these hands fists, and then also on this, that waist is a little bit rotated out. It's rotating out even a bit more, and my torso, I'm like kind of approaching this from an angle right here, right? See the angle of my torso? If I'm like drawing through the model, one of my hips is right here, the other hip is over here, so I know that waist is a little bit rotated open to cam, and then that torso, the upper torso, is also a little bit open. It's twisting back the other way, but it's still open in there as well. Right, so I'm just copying kind of what I'm seeing, kind of trying to nail the line of action. If you need to rotate, if you need like that, because I noticed I have like a little bit of a straight core here, we can rotate this up a little bit, and we can rotate these down a little bit, because I'm at this point I'm kind of looking over that ledge. So you can go into these as well, rotate all these controls to get that pose. We might need to rotate this. Man, her head looks really weird from this angle, so I'm gonna go in and, oh, the parent. Okay, let's change the parent of these as well to world, just so we know that everything is working. So I'm gonna go to world there, and let's zero these out in our graph editor as well. So now it's gonna be world on each of these. Note that I'm working with auto key. You saw me just move that. If you're not working with auto key and you change your positioning of that, it can really remove your poses, right? Because I didn't press S on any of these keys yet, so be very careful for that. And also, let's go to, let's remove our foot roll off of this, and remove the rotation on that as well. And then we also, we're a little bit too far forward here. I want to go back to where my foot is not hyperextending. And then let's also foot roll up. There we go. I'm also observing that my foot in the reference gets real close to the gap. I want that for this character too, but my main control is way far back, right? So let's make the rest of the pose first, and then we can tackle that. This arm is a little bit, or this hand is a little bit more rotated out like this. And then so a fist, I'll fix the fist in a little bit. I want to get the main body working though. And then as that's rotating over, I have kind of a, I'm gonna rotate that forward a little bit, and this one out a little bit, because I can no longer see this one from cam, so it's probably somewhere back there. Let's check our reference. Also, Keyframe MP is like, I have like a really old version and it's free. But if anyone finds a good video player that lets you scrub frame by frame, that's like all you need. But let's see where that other arm went. Yeah, so it's back. It's probably kind of like halfway through my waist, so it's probably like right here. Osri's a little bit thinner than I am, with a little bit like puffier clothing on, so her silhouettes might pop out a little bit differently. But yeah, so that's looking good. Let's select our whole rig and press S. And I'm gonna save scene as, and I'm gonna call this, let's just put this in, I'm gonna have to put it on my other drive. Let's do new course materials, and let's call this like jump animation. I'm gonna save as, there we go. Okay, and now we have this, right? So we have three keys, okay? And like I said, it's a little bit far from the jump point. So I'm gonna take this main control and I'm gonna move it until it's right on, until that footfall is like right next to the gap. And then you'll notice that, boom, Osri pops back, right? It's because we've been setting keys on the entire character. So if we want, we can just right-click copy, right-click paste. Please don't do Control-C, Control-V in this viewport. It is going to ruin the animation. And there we go. And then you can also just make sure for later, you can select those keys, right-click, and make their tangents auto, just so it's going to be nice and flat. But yeah, so we have three keys now, right? We have three keys. We need more, but I want you guys. Ooh, I'm noticing that there's like 1, 2, 3 frames until it actually contacts. So I might need to, or like completely flattens the ground. So 1, 2, 3. So I'm gonna need another key over here, where this is nice and flat. And then let's hit that pose. And I'm noticing that this waist is a little bit further forward. And it's a little bit rotated. And this hand, what did this hand do between those 3 frames? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It went even further into my middle silhouette here. So it's probably like about back here. And this torso, we rotate that a little bit more open, just a little bit. And then let's see what that back arm is doing. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that one's like probably rotating a little bit more out this way as I'm getting into that spot. And I'm looking at my position here. I think it's pretty good. I can probably rotate this back a little bit, slightly, this a little bit forward, a little bit down perhaps. And I just want to make sure I feel like this hand is still not far back enough. I want to get it halfway through that silhouette. And let's rotate that a little bit. So I think that's going to be a good key pose as well. Let's press S there. And then it's about like, when do I come to a full stop? Okay, so that's when I'm completely stopping. So that was about that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 18 frames later, I hit like this final stop. I'm observing my waist in there. See that? The waist goes up real slow into that pose. That was 18 frames from this. So let's count them up. Alt period to advance 1 frame. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So let's get that pose. That's gonna be our big pose right here. I'm gonna do a little bit of foot roll because I'm like on the tip right there. And we can also do like toe twist with that a little bit to hit that angle. Might need to move the knee pull vector though when we do this, you know, so we might need to do something like that to make it more aligned with that foot. You always want that knee pointing to where the foot is. You can't really, you can change it a little bit, like this doesn't look awful, but boom, if you go too far to the side, it immediately looks broken, right? So be careful of that. And then let's get our hands and our elbows and all that, and let's move that. At this point, I'm kind of like fully supported on that front foot, so I'm gonna move that waist over there, and yeah, it's looking pretty good. And let's try. My waist is a little bit rotated, kind of at that halfway point. And I'm looking across. And this arm is a little bit more straight here. And it's like right by the side of me. So let's get that pose in there. Go. So this is like all of the action up to that first main stop, and then I'm gonna show. I'm gonna show like kind of getting into the in-betweens. The in-betweens here. So, boom. That's looking good. That's looking good. I think my foot, actually, we could probably use a little bit less toe twist there. Just a little bit less. Because now we have a lot of space in here, right? And then it's like, it's not as much animation, right? So if I right click and disable step preview, you can see how everything's moving. Look at how like this foot falls and then it stays raised. It needs another key kind of making it completely flatten to the ground. These feet need keys making them raise from the ground. We need the up and down of the hips. We need a lot of stuff still, right? So don't just plot these out and be like, okay, I'm done, right? It's gonna be it's pretty like we've done the basic rough like main keyframes of this, but now we need to start getting some of the breakdowns. I wouldn't call these complete breakdowns. These are also, I would consider this still main keys, but I've seen animators refer to these as breakdowns. I usually reserve breakdowns for stuff like making like anticipation, creating like overshoot, overlap, that sort of stuff. That's where I usually put a lot of breakdowns, but can also define arcs though. And that is kind of what we're doing with these in-betweens. You know, it all works together, y'all. So so let's start figuring out how to make this look better, right? So like this is our first pose, right? So let's go back to that. And I'm gonna go forward about halfway through that, right? So I want you to be checking like what each limb is doing separately. my waist is going up and down. So in this like halfway point, I'm gonna need it to be above, like the waist going up. I'm gonna need this foot crossing the other foot. It's almost overlapped entirely. My screen, like the hand closest to the screen, my left hand is gonna be moving back. My right hand is moving ahead. So yeah, so let's get all that in there. So if you're going between two keys, that's great. There's also a plugin called Tween Machine, where you can drag your slider to somewhere. And do I have it in? Is it in here? No, I don't believe I have it loaded up. Do I have it in the animation? Nah, doesn't look like it. You can grab it from online. Tween Machine, it's a great thing. It pops up a little panel, and then you can just drag a slider, and for any control you have, it's gonna look at the key in front of it and behind it. And then if you put it like at 50%, you know, it's gonna be right in between those. We can also kind of just simulate that though with turning off Enable Step Preview, selecting all the controls. Make sure that you shift left click, drag on your timeline, right click, and set the tangents to auto. You can also do all of that within the graph editor, which is something I would recommend getting used to as you go. But look at this, if I go like halfway through, I can select those keys or select the controls and press S, and then right click, go back to Enable Step Preview. And then I have like kind of a key or kind of a frame that's like almost there, but now we can like refine it and do stuff like this. I'm gonna zero out my roll. I'm gonna zero out my rotation on this as well, and I'm gonna rotate it down, right? So I'm gonna rotate that downward and put it in the correct position. It's like a little bit behind this other one. This one needs to be buttoned down completely to the ground. We can't have any rotation on that. And I'm gonna be moving this one up. Let's move it up with the hands. And let's make sure we're in world with W and left click, holding both of those at the same time. And look at that. So let's get her moving up. And then this hand was moving back. I think it already has due to that nice little interpolation. We can also move this shoulder like that and move this one. I'm gonna lower this to make it a little bit more natural looking. And then there we go. That's our key, like our in between, right? Our breakdown, if you would, you know, like I kind of view this more as a main key, because if you look at any of like the Animator's survival kit, this is the passing pose, you know, so very important to get that in there. So now it's already looking real good, you know. Then if you want to get more detailed with it, you can add like the minute stuff, like see how, like my first pose was this, but there's like a few frames where it's still orienting on the tip of that foot right there. So you can get that in there too, but this is how you rough animate, right? You get these main big keys solved and out of the way. So yeah, that's our little animation lecture. I hope you had a good time. Animate your own scenes, gather reference, use the most perfect reference that you can. And yeah, see you later, y'all.